Firstly, thank you so much to the ARMA team for inviting and including the Ripcord folks, myself, and on this webinar. I think especially in this sort of current climate, keeping the communication open is a great thing. For those who don't know me, Wasim Khan, I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Ripcord. My responsibilities are for all of our business development, our alliances and partnerships, responsibility for our digital transformation strategy, as well as our global marketing. So I'm going to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes talking about two key areas. The first one is going to be about what we're seeing around current market trends, obviously very topical with all the COVID and the Corona part and the impact that's having, and really looking at the sort of the specific impact that's having on digitization. And then the second part of this is going to be more around explaining what Ripcord's doing in this space and new ways that we're trying to bring real value to our client base and our prospects as well. So with that, let me just minimize some of this. So in terms of 2020, I think we'd all agree it's been surreal is one description here, but if we kind of look at what's happening in this marketplace specific to digitization, there's a number of different aspects that really are impacting us. If you look at the working from home, the remote working, one of the key implications of that is that business has to continue. So business continuity suddenly becomes way, way more important. The other thing that we're seeing is there's a real need around, what is it that's actual priority versus, what is more of a nice to have. And what we're seeing there is that that's being very specific to actual processes, but also impacts investments as well. And then if you kind of look at it more from the next level of, how do I actually do work when I'm remote, then the accessibility of documents suddenly becomes a key hot topic. So again, impacting a lot of industries. And then it's not just about accessing that information, it's how productive you can be at accessing that information. Can I access the right level of information? And what we're also seeing is that there's a growth around digital substitutes or digital alternatives that work hand in hand with the overall paper to digitization kind of way of doing things. So that's from a kind of a macro setting. I think the key takeaway for us really is that if you look at this, it's really about, when we speak to our prospects and our customers and our partners, what we're seeing here is that there's a real need to prioritize in terms of where the effort and focus is. You can't do too many things. There's only so much investment and the economy is obviously taking a hit. So prioritization and focus are really some of the key takeaways that we're seeing. And then if we look at this more from a challenges that need to be addressed from a digital transformation perspective, then there's a number of things that really do come to the fore. Aspects around, how do I improve the customer experience? How do I reduce processing times? How do I better leverage investment in current or new software around automation? How can I get quicker decision making? Make sure that all of this is done in a way that from an audit perspective, from a compliance perspective, that we're adhering to the rules and the norms. So it's really a case of getting tangible value from a lot of these business processes, making the most of the investments that are there. But that value also doesn't just look at costs. I think there's an efficiency talk track here as well as more of an improvement talk track. So how do we really get these business processes working in a way that really accelerates growth or efficiencies for our customers and our prospects? Which hopefully, again, I've only got 10 minutes or so, but from a trends perspective, kind of frames where sort of Ripcord's coming from this. And then if I step back and try to explain what Ripcord is, for those who don't know Ripcord, we're a relatively new player to this scene. We were founded in 2015. Our headquarters is in Hewlett, California. And our mantra has been around digitizing everything. And it's quite outlandish the way we say that, but our view is that we're really focused on new technology, new software to really help drive that. So that's the way we back that up. The way we position ourselves is we're a robotic digitization company, but we provide an integrated SaaS offering. And for us, integration is really in two parts. There's an integration component that's around the hardware and the robotics. And I'm going to talk about that and show something around that as well. But we also have our own software. So it's not just a case of digitizing content and information, but it's then also having our own content services platform. Our platform's called Canopy, that really then smartly manages that data and that information. And we then embed additional tools around AI or machine learning on top of that to better enable business processes. So for us, it's really a case of an integrated approach delivers the greatest value. The best way of describing this is often show a video at the same time. They always say, be careful of showing videos on webinars, but I'm going to try it anyway. So bear with me. Hope you can all listen and hear this. It's a minute or so. Hopefully it will get the message around our integrated value proposition. So I'm going to start playing it now.
The next generation of digital transformation. Data is power, but not locked away in yesterday's formats. Ripcord's automated systems capture high-resolution scans and securely store documents, reclaiming the valuable data they contain. Your digital scans are organized to mirror the original documents precisely and uploaded to Canopy, Ripcord's cloud content services platform, so you always know where to find your data. Online, text recognized, classified, entities extracted. Artificial intelligence drives our advanced search engine. Our analytical tools automatically read and visualize your data, enabling a deeper understanding of your business, your customers, and your opportunities. And third-party API access makes Ripcord's many services available to any workflow. Pull the Ripcord and capture your data, because data is power.
So hopefully that came across in terms of our integrated value proposition. And it really is a focus on more a seamless approach between the hardware and the software aspects, and also delivering something that's faster and more efficient. If we then kind of go into our value proposition, it really comes down to sort of three key areas for us. There's the smart robotics aspect, there's a smart content management aspect, but there's also this business process enablement aspect as well. And we see all three of these sort of working hand in hand. If I look at the first one in terms of the value and the tools that we have here, then it really starts around information being ingested, but also the assembly of that information. So Ripcord has invested a lot in sensor technology, understanding the assembly of documents. So looking at things from a digitization perspective around a tree and branch structure. So if we're digitizing legal content, there may be folders, subfolders, even post-it notes. How do we better understand that taxonomy? How do we also understand and create a digital twin of that information as well as ingested? And in terms of our robotics, we're using computer vision guided robots, mechanical arms, so that you don't need humans to remove staples and paper clips and those sort of things. At the same time, the quality of our imaging resolution goes up to 1000 DPI. So what we're really trying to do in that first circle around robotic digitization is really do things in a very, very different manner to what other folks do in this space. So our view is there's a new way of doing things, which is the things that I've just talked about. And there's an older way of doing things, which is more labor, manual intensive, a lot more error prone. And the advantages that really provides Ripcord and our customers is there's a greater speed, a greater accuracy, and clarity and quality around the information that we digitize. If we then move on to the second part around our smart content services platform, then again, it's stated there, but our focus really is on understanding data and more around how do we get structured metadata from the content that we digitize. And here the view is it isn't sufficient for us just to tag some information. How do we better analyze that data that we're digitizing? And then if I look at this second part around our content services platform, there are really two sort of aspects of this. There's the intelligent capture component, and then there's the content services platform itself. In terms of the intelligent capture component, we use different sets of tools, best of breed tools, our own tools around how we classify information, how we cluster information, how we automatically recognize and extract that information from field at entity level. And then the other approach here is we understand the content services space is very crowded. I used to lead the Xerox DocuShare business, so that's kind of my background, but we know there's a lot of different content services players. So our view here really is, how do we better interact with data? So how do we make that customer and user experience, really meaningful. So we've invested a lot around the data accessibility, the data presentment, different ways that we're doing things is things like data advanced search and different taxonomy views that allow you to look, interrogate data in a different way, more like a pivot table around understanding content rather than just being sort of restricted to a folder structure. And then how you interact with data also from a visual perspective. How do we embed technology around mapping tools so you can drill down your data visually from maps and by the location and different coordinates. And what we're finding is that actually creates a lot of value in places like HR records departments, legal departments who want to understand where information is situated, and also a lot of our oil and gas customers as well. So for that second part, really, as I mentioned, is around one, intelligently capturing data and different types of data. So it isn't just structured data, it's semi-structured data, it's free form data, unstructured data, handwritten data, getting a real understanding of that, applying our machine learning models. And then the second part is, how do I interact with that data? So our view is if we do the first two things in the right way, so we've digitized in a smart way, we're better understanding your data, then that really powers that third circle around business process enablement. And often the success of business processes is going to be predicated on the quality of the data, the understanding of data. So our view is if we do the first two things right, then we're really going to power those different business processes. And often that's integration to other third-party systems, some level of approval workflow embedded in our own systems, et cetera, as well. But just making the whole end outcome from a business process a lot more seamless. We've got different deep dives in all of these, but given the fact there's about 10 or 15 minutes, hopefully this gives you a good overview in terms of the three key areas that Ripcord plays in. So then if I move on, often the best way of bringing this sort of stuff to life is to show real examples, real use cases, and I'll definitely come on to that. But before I do that, I wanted to sort of make sure that we're topical in terms of what's currently happening to our business. And what we're seeing is there are certain areas of our business that are seeing a lot more demand. There's obviously some areas such as oil and gas that the demand's kind of gone down or stabilized. But where we're seeing a higher demand for our services and a need for our offerings is in those three key areas on the left. So loan origination, we're finding there's a lot more information, documentation that needs to be processed, whether it's the deal jackets, deal packets, understanding, categorizing that, doing that efficiently and better in terms of accuracy perspective. From a correspondence management, we're seeing a higher uptick, whether it's claim forms, enrollment forms, again, better accuracy, feeding that information accurately into the different third-party systems or different export formats. We're seeing a rise in that. And then aspects such as HR records management, and that really isn't just records management. We're seeing a demand for sort of HR records solutions because there's a lot more around policy management, compliance, forms that are going out to folks, not just digital formats, but also paper formats. How do we aggregate that? How do we make the access to that information readily available? So we as a business have seen real growth in these three areas. And if you go to our website, you will actually see there's a lot more information about these three areas as well. But if I then sort of change tack and look at the value that Ripcord brings, hopefully you understood the three components of our value proposition around the smart digitization, the smart content services, and the business process enablement. The three examples we're showing there, if I quickly look at each one of those, Coca-Cola is a great customer for us in terms of their bottler network. What Ripcord brought to the table there was consolidation of a number of different suppliers within their life cycle around managing reconciliation of delivery notes and invoices and getting revenue recognition improvements from a financial metrics perspective. So again, having an integrated approach to this provided a lot more around consolidation benefits and efficiencies around there. Waste Connections, large waste management company. From an HR perspective, a lot of different data accumulated via acquisitions. How do we use Ripcord's different technology around better understanding data via clustering tools, via just recognition tools? How do we template that? So from a machine learning perspective, we can process this data and the different data types a lot quicker. So a lot of good things happening there. And then from a value and around decision-making process, how can I better understand the content I'm digitizing to make more effective decisions around building management and that was the example that we had with UCLA. Again, we've got a few other examples, but in the interest of time, I thought these were the best ones. So moving on more of a recap. Hopefully these images are quite legible, but this is just reaffirming, without actually coming to our Ripcord site. We do have some videos around this, but looking at the way we do things, we have invested a lot in our own technology around this space. So the images that you see on the top left are our own investments in our robotics. And again, what I mentioned is we have a seamless process. So our robotics and our software works hand in hand. We're also embedding a lot more around new technologies, whether it's AI or machine learning to better understand content types. We're also augmenting that with computer vision technology so we can understand more around unstructured data as well. So we're really trying to get a real focus on better understanding data. And then, as I mentioned, as you manage that data, as you interact with that data, having our own content services platform canopy really allows us to then build on top of that. So if it's just a case of different integration with third parties or better embedded workflow, we're really trying to make this more of a content services platform that we can then add different layers on top of. So again, you're probably getting sick and tired of me saying the integrated approach works, but for us, it really does bring significant value. So hopefully that's coming through. And then just sort of summarizing where we are, the sort of the values and the benefits that Ripcord's bringing specifically in this current day and age. Again, I'm not going to harp on about integrated approach, but it really is around, how do we get better access to data? How do we, interact with simpler file structures in a way that, really benefits from the user's experience? As I mentioned, how do I then understand the context of this data, whether it's understanding what I do with this data or more around the background of this data? And then our approach really is, as I mentioned, an integrated SaaS approach, cloud first, and our software really, our development roadmap is all around, how we look at customers interacting with their business processes. How do we look at the journey map? How do we make this simpler? At the same time, how do we make sure that from a compliance and audit perspective, that we're making sure that, we're checking those boxes as well. So hopefully that gave you a good sense of what Ripcord's doing, what our focus areas are, the value that we're bringing to certain use cases. As I mentioned on our website, you can learn more. We've got specific use case examples. We've got customer examples there as well. There's more that you'd want to know about some of the things I've talked about. By all means, reach out to me as well. So hopefully I was within my time limit. I didn't go over too much.
I think you did pretty good. Yeah, pretty close anyway.
Okay.
I think we'll hold questions, if it's okay with everyone, until the end because of the tight time constraint. But I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to seeing that robot pull staples.
Oh yeah, we have actually. I think we have some videos, but they're a bit long. But by all means, I can send some links out to folks if they're interested in seeing that. Yeah,
that'd be good. We could post that on the ARMA SAC website, showing how they get those staples out. Anyway, Steve, I think you're up.
Thank you. And can you see my screen now?
We can see you, but we can't see your screen yet.
Oh, hold on a second. I've been in a Zoom, a Teams, and a WebEx today. So I'm bound to get this right. Give me 1 second.
Looky there.
How are we doing?
I see it.
Excellent. Hey, let me just say something, Wasim. Ripcord, I checked you guys out a while ago. And to Chuck's point, I think that robotics is super cool. I mean, we're supposed to talk about digitization today, right? And 75% of the work in any kind of digitization project is about the physical logistics of the paper, right? It's not about elegance of OCR. So that I just think Ripcord, what they do in that robotics up front is certainly unique.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Steve Irons. I'm president of DocSolid. And today I think I'll be a focused story on the theme of digitization in these times. Our company, DocSolid, focuses on paper to digital solutions for the legal market, mostly law firms and mostly large law firms, also corporate legal departments. But what we help them is with a paper to digital transformation. which it can be pretty arduous in a law firm. And that love-hate relationship with paper has had them as an industry lagging behind the rest of many other industries in becoming a digital organization. So the solutions we have are pretty innovative. Our methods for managing scanning, for managing printing and shredding in a law firm are unique, they're patented. And 4 of the top 10 law firms out there in the US are conducting paper to digital projects with us right now. So our business is digitization. Some of it for active records, some of it for inactive records. And then along comes COVID-19, right? So about 90 days ago, we woke up at DocSolid and realized that our customers, all of a sudden, were going to need a digital mailroom. They sent everybody home and then went to work on a project to establish a uniform work from home capability in the law firm. And they had all these primary issues, but then immediately all the secondary issues caught up to them. I mean, what do I do? Because I got daily mail that comes in. It's got documents from the courts. They are docketable. I've got file rooms with matters in them that my attorneys need. So digitization took a quick spin. And as we look at these times, DocSolid for the legal market thinks about the transformation based upon the pandemic in 3 different seasons. And the first was the season of uncertainty. Everybody went home, and we've got to figure out how to get them to work from home. And that went pretty well. Law firms spent a lot of money on technology. After a while, I think they got to say, we got this. And then they started to focus a little bit more on, first initially it was personal productivity, but then it was organizational productivity. And then all those secondary issues came forth. But they're kind of moving out of that first season of uncertainty, and they think that they're settled. But now settling season is here. And in settling season, everybody says, what's it going to be like? When are we going to be able to get our people back into the office? Or are we ever going to be able to get all of our people back into the office? So now they're starting to decide on some of the new systems they're going to need for the new normal. And none of us really know what the new normal is going to look like, but we know we better be more digital. So DocSolid, and again, this is an isolated story about digitization in this times, invented a solution called AirMail 2. And we started 90 days ago. We built it on top of our paper to digital platform. And we now have installed it our first 3 customers. 2 of them are AmLaw law firms. So AirMail 2 is a digital mailroom for a law firm or for a corporate legal department, most of which were just operating by delivering mail paper before the crisis hit. But now everybody's at home. And even when the COVID-19 moves from pandemic to whatever it's going to be like, it's pretty evident in the legal market that they're going to have to be able to support their entire workforce at home or back in the office all the time, both. So the need for paper to digital delivery of that daily inbound mail that comes from the US Postal Service or from FedEx or UPS envelopes or process server deliveries, those happen directly to the law firms. That needs to be made into a digital operation, as well as document requests. So if an attorney working at home or if some other member of the staff working at home needs something out of the file room, those need to be served up digitally now. So obviously this is a scanning, OCRing process, but in a strategically implemented instead of a rapidly implemented digital mailroom, you're going to start delivering these documents directly into the document management system or whatever the case management software is that the knowledge workers are using. So in the legal market, that's a focus on the major document management software systems. NetDocuments, iManage. This is an essential operation now at every law firm, and it happened overnight. And it has new requirements, like how do we deploy this? Because it's got to get out there pretty quickly. And law firms tend to have many offices spread around the country, and in some cases around the world. So how do we deploy this? And we made our AirMail 2 solution a hosted system. It's got to be very productive and simple and secure, 3 separate activities. But, you know, daily mail has to get out. You're going to have a staff that's in a mailroom that is not particularly sophisticated. They need to be able to do things in a simple fashion. And the way these scanned images get delivered has to be secure. Each legal operation tends to have multiple offices. Some are much smaller than others, which means you have a different grade of staff in them. So you got to think about training and how this is going to be operated from different locations. DocSolid's preference is to deliver daily mail into the document management system directly, not use the email system, for example, where you don't want to stick attachments in this day and age, and not use network folders where you just end up with dark, deep wells of black information. So deliver to the platform that is the digital platform for the firm. When this happens, you need to be able to do it from existing mail rooms or file rooms. So you need to be able to use every Ricoh, Xerox, Canon, HP device that might be out there. And it's kind of the fur hits the fan when you got to get the mail out. So you've got to have quality control processes in place that do a lot of automated checking that things happened well. And although this paper, a lot of it can be shredded eventually, it's going to have to be staged for some interim period. Some legal documents have to be permanently filed, but most can be shredded. You're just going to need to stage the paper in case the original documents are going to need to be dealt with again. So all this was a dilemma. We needed to put it together very quickly. And fortunately for DocSolid, we already had a platform that integrated with the leading document management systems that already had a mail theme. It's called a postmark platform. And we use stamps. These are like the size of US postage stamps, but they happen to have globally unique sequential numbers on them. And it just means that whoever the logged in user is, we know their next stamp number at all times, so they can just think about them like postage stamps. They're going to put a stamp on a document, they're going to scan it in a simple process, and it's going to get to where it needs to go in the document management system. So I'll just focus on daily mail because I want to walk through what this looks like. There's just a few quick steps to run this operation. The daily mail gets opened by existing staff, and in these times, sometimes it's temporary staff or people that haven't even been there before. This is all set up in batches so that multiple people can work the same job at a time, or so that you can be efficient with just one person. So they open the mail and they prep it. Then they're going to run our software, which I'll show you, and it simply lets them address who's going to get it, and they put a stamp on it. And then they can just take stacks of these documents now, and then scan them with the push of one button at any of their existing digital copiers and run it through a quality control session afterwards. So if I'm the operator and I've opened the daily mail, I take the first document off the stack, and I've got my little roll of stamps there. Again, this is just a roll of pre-printed stamps, and I can just think about them that way, even though they're barcodes. The AirMail 2 software, which is a zero footprint web client, will allow that operator to just read the envelope or the document and say, who gets this? We integrate the AirMail 2 software with the firm's Active Directory. So basically, they're just going to start typing who it is that gets that particular mail document. The software will fill it in for them automatically. And that's really the only thing they need to do. The software will show them, after they've entered the addressee, the next number in their roll of stamps. So all they do is enter the addressee's name and put the stamp on the document. Stamp, of course, is barcode. And they would go through the mail and do, usually in a law firm, you get about one piece of mail per day per attorney. So if I'm at a 50 attorney office, I'm going to do this 50 times. And I'm going to have a stack of documents now that are barcoded. and I'll put them in a little folding out basket where somebody can come pick it up and take my scanning work away from me, or I could just walk it over to the local copier to scan it. So a very simple piece of software, cloud delivered. The back end of our software is going to speak through the security system and the API to the document management system where these images are going to go. But the operators only have to have a login to this piece of software. So we're abstracting the document management system and creating a situation where the operators don't need to log in. Again, a system for our times very quickly. Deploy a browser-based application, make it very simple to operate. There's other things that we can do on this screen, but I'll skip them now. Suffice to say, you could tell the system a lot more about the documents. But as the lowest common denominator, you're going to have an expectation that the mailroom staff doesn't know anything about them. So you just give them the simple task of saying who gets this. And when you want to scan, they can walk over to their local digital copier. We put a little programmable button. They all have a programmable panel, and we just put a button that says Airmail 2, and they can place their whole stack in there and scan it. They can also use big dedicated scanners in the same way. But we don't care what make or model the machine is. They don't have to log in. They don't have to type, and we can use all digital copiers without adding any hardware or software, the ones that are sitting on the floor. So we're standing up this digital mailroom using the existing infrastructure. And then after the scanning takes place, we have a server connected to the network. Whether you've got one office or 50, when there is a stack digitally scanned at one of these machines, our server picks it up, goes through it and finds the stamps, which are barcodes, and it uses them to separate out the individual pieces of mail. It OCRs and makes a searchable PDF. We have an audit system that's tracking every paper document through the process. But lastly, we're going to read that stamp, and we know exactly where to write it into the document management system, which is literally a daily mail folder for each of the users on the document management system. So everything's been put away now in an automated process through the digital mailroom. And once it's there, we've updated the search engines, and if you retrieve that searchable PDF, we remove the stamp, that label, we remove that from the image when we store it, because attorneys don't want to see it. So that is, in these times, the way our company has built a digital mailroom, targeting the legal market, which is where we work mostly, law firms and corporate legal departments, because they're still very paper intensive, and because before COVID-19 hit, they were delivering the mail in paper. But you need to have a productive, secure, and reliable digital mailroom now. And that is our digitization story for these times. The other option, of course, is that once there's some relaxation of the COVID crisis, these people can go back to their offices and their staff, and they can sort the physical mail, and they can put it in order, then put it in little wire baskets and walk it back up to the 4th floor and take the elevator to the 10th floor and take it to each legal assistant and attorney. And you could go do that if you wanted to increase the herd immunity in this new normal in your firm. But in all likelihood, we're going to go digital now and stay digital with our mailrooms after these times. We think the digital mailroom is the new normal. And that's our short story for digitization in these times.
Steve, thank you very much. Very nice story. And look forward to circling back with you on that story. So if you could take that down for just a moment.
I can.
Okay. And well, let me say that we all know that we'd like to be back to normal. And we don't know what the new normal is going to be, none of us. And I guess what I would say is that the new normal is going to be abnormal. There's no way it's going to be back to where it was. So if that's the case, we have to anticipate the new abnormal. And so some of the things that Wasim and Steve are talking about are tools that we can use to manage our information and our data in ways that allow us to be more flexible. I hearken back to 9/11, and I recall that one of the large investment banker firms, they were in the Twin Towers. They lost their entire office and all of the equipment they had there, but they had anticipated well, and they had a second site that operated seamlessly, so their customers and anybody else who had access to their system did not notice any disruption. And so that's the way I think we have to think going forward, that, well, when's the next pandemic? Or when's the next disaster, or what have you? Which is why these things are going to be more and more important going forward. As Steve alluded, part of the new normal is going to be not to go backwards to some of our old methodologies, but to use a lot of these tools and technologies going forward. Part of that is that the signature on a piece of paper. I think, Steve, you'll agree that lawyers don't like to let loose of that wet signature. And
they're going to have to.
They're going to have to. So in government space and in private space, particularly the lending community, the real estate community, like the legal community, have been very late to the party. And they're catching up. Now disclosures are going out primarily through electronic signature. Most of the time I see DocuSign, as I mentioned earlier. But one thing they haven't done yet, some states have gone to electronic notaries. But the acknowledgement, in other words, you're signing, I'm borrowing this money and I'm obligated to repay it, particularly when it comes to real estate transactions. They still want that wet signature. And that wet signature right now, most of the time, comes only at the very end of that process, where they have a signing and the notary shows up. And many of you are aware of that. If you've refinanced your homes in this COVID-19 time, different procedures, but they still physically show up with physical documents. So the big question is, what are the protocols? What are the authorities? How is all that going to extend the kinds of things that Wasim and Steve have been talking about today? And in what forums? And for those of you who are in government, government doesn't pivot very fast on these things. It doesn't anticipate very well, at least historically. So those are big questions that they are going to have to look down the road and think about some of the new things coming around. Artificial intelligence, that's a broad term. When you get into the guts and feathers of artificial intelligence, some is more intelligent than others, some more capable, and more broad, and perhaps more deep, can penetrate farther into the context in which the artificial intelligence is operating. But let me throw out another term, IoT. I don't know how many of you are aware of what IoT covers, but essentially that's information about sensors and all kinds of other electronic devices that are embedded in our utilities and roadways and all kinds of other things. And that's a big thing coming along, and there are lots of issues surrounding it. Privacy, for one, and many others. So what is ARMA? ARMA is about records management. Steve was talking about it, and I think Wasim also, a document management system. What's the difference between a document management system and a records management system. And there's only one real difference. A records management system has a retention value associated with those documents. And oftentimes you hear that referred to today as an information governance system, which incorporates the technologies that Steve and Wasim are talking about. So with that, we've got a little over 10 minutes. I wanted to open it up, remind you that coming up in 60 days or so, we're going to have a Zoom meeting focused entirely on these issues of e-sign, how do you do it, who are the authorities, and so forth. And I look forward to that. So without further ado, do we have some questions that you would like to ask our two guests or me? And if somebody provides an answer and you want to follow up, so jump in. Who's going to go first? All right, I'll ask a question. Steve, how much did Canon pay you to put that Canon scanner up on that?
Not enough.
Not enough?
And
all right,
it's collecting in these times.
Well, that Canon scanner is a workhorse. I'm familiar with it.
You know, for baseline scanning, not the crazy stuff like Wasim is doing, but for baseline scanning, you know, one generation ago, all the MFPs, MFDs, digital copiers got to be great scanners. They're just great devices out there now. So you mentioned 1,000 DPI, but you know, 300 DPI is going to get it done in a front office in a law firm.
Pretty good.
And it's been a long time since there's been any issue about that. And they're just terrific scan devices. They usually have decent software from the vendors as well, but getting paper in and out of them on each side, that's the trouble. That's the hard part.
For high volume scanning, sometimes the copiers aren't up to speed. They don't have the paper handling capabilities, though they're getting better all the time. But Kodak, Canon, a lot of the others, they really focused on that paper handling aspect. Right. Not usually like Wasim is doing with, certainly not robotics, but do you remember a machine called Photomatrix?
Yeah.
Well, Photomatrix had that belt with the suction and all of that, moving paper across. And you could do easily 3,000 an hour with that, with the proper training. So we've delved in a little bit into some of the scanning technology. Do we have some questions from our audience? Anjum, I know you're just chomping at the bit to ask a question. Jump in.
Hey, it's Corinne Vita. A question for Ripcord. How can Ripcord help law firms improve their business?
Corinne, you work for Ripcord.
Well, a little bit of a plant. I know we have quite a few legal folks representing the legal community. Can you make a few comments, Wasim?
Sure, yeah. I mean, a lot of this, actually, we've been having some conversations with some legal departments, more sort of M&A departments, where there's a lot of information that is being kind of in different formats, different types of document classifications. And it's interesting you guys were talking about DPI, because having higher quality DPI in some of those older images does actually help, and also from a future proofing perspective. So to answer Corinne's question, yeah, what we're finding is use cases are more around, yeah, how do I better extract quality from these images, better accessibility, how do I then integrate them into the third-party systems, etc. I mean, we're not an e-discovery or anything like that, but at the same time, we can feed into e-discoveries and integrate with those. But it's more around the sort of the upfront ingestion and also just accurate data digitization. So
I can add to that for Ripcord, and really the theme being digitization. If you want to talk about law firms, so law firms rent the most expensive real estate in the world, in the biggest cities, in the best downtown offices, and this situation we're in now is going to change them forever, because obviously it forced them to send their entire workforce home. All law firms have discovered how they can operate with that home workforce. And it's not ideal on all fronts, but there's just no doubt that everybody's not coming back. That's going to present a massive opportunity for law firms to reduce their real estate footprint in the most expensive real estate in the world. And to do that, they're going to go through digitization projects, because if I want to compress that footprint, makes fewer offices, just a conference room floor, I want to get rid of my file rooms. They have big file rooms. So I think in the law firm marketplace, there's going to be a wildfire for the upcoming couple years, 3 years of digitization projects to burn down those file rooms that they have.
Yeah, actually, just to add to what Steve, what you've just said is that one of the things that we're seeing more from once I've got the content is, where a lot of these firms are kind of trying to digitize, there's a lot of different content management systems in the environment as well. So how do I normalize, how do I aggregate my content? How do I kind of look at it from that perspective as well? So there's other questions that suddenly arise from what's happening in the current space, where if you are kind of rationalizing, then how do I then get better access to my information that's consistent with other types of information as well? So sometimes these things pose more questions, but yeah, it's interesting.
So we've got about 6 minutes left. Do we have some more questions? Charlie. Charlie Sedano, you may see on the screen, he's, I'm going to out him. He is our regional manager for ARMA, and happens to have a PhD, so I'm sure he's got an intelligent question or two buried in there.
Well, perhaps, and in general, I got to the meeting late because I got tied up with a couple of other ARMA things. But anyway, just to make it clear, I'm the regional director for ARMA Pacific region, which is about 600 people in 4 states in general. And and I've only been here at your meeting for about 7 or 8 minutes. So we were basically talking about scanning, like I said,
digitization, I believe, would be a proper term, because scanning is a part of it, but only a part. And really, so you're talking about distributed work environments, basically. I think, is that not correct, guys?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay. And everybody's facing that, unfortunately, because of I'm a consultant nowadays in the pharma business, and there's pockets of information everywhere, and it's just a question of where do you go from here in general. And the tendency seems to be like, well, those pockets seem to be working well all by themselves, whether they're old stuff like Documentum, which is still being run actually in pharma companies, or whether they bought a new product and they're starting to utilize that one too. It's a question of how do you best integrate all of these systems to manage your information. And I think the industry is facing this right now, and there are ways of doing it. And they tack on AI or something of the kind as a way of figuring out what's there. And it's probably right, because the techniques of finding things are getting much better than they were even 10 years ago. So the things have developed quite a bit. And they probably will continue to develop anyway as techniques get better. So I guess, so my question is then, where is the future?
Well, before you got here, we were both Wasim and Steve were essentially talking about what their role in the new future, or as they put it, the new normal, and clearly people are discovering, even as we're discovering here, that we can communicate and we can do things without meeting physically. And there are many things that I've gleaned from this presentation that I think we're going to save for the Records Knowledge Conference, because there are some fill-in areas and some insights that that might help all of our attendees and our presenters. So we'll see. But Charlie, yeah, I mean, that's the top of the question. Do you have something, Wasim?
Yeah, I was just gonna, the things that Charlie mentioned were, I mean, obviously it's a very broad question in terms of where the future is, but in terms of some of the things that we're looking to do at Ripcord is, how do you simplify the way that information is ingested? So there's, from the robotic side, we're actually looking at things like terahertz imaging, if that has a play, but more from the data perspective, it's, we understand, and I'm sure a lot of folks understand this, there's a lot of structured data and semi-structured data, but there's also a hell of a lot of unstructured data. So how do we get better at using tools to understand that? So a lot of our investment is going into understanding unstructured data. And as I kind of mentioned, our view is that tagging and sort of base classifying data is one thing, but having a better understanding of the context of that data and establishing metadata is really going to better enable business processes. And by having better understanding of that data, there's probably other newer business processes that folks aren't even thinking about, but because they have this access to this information and the background to that information, that's going to drive a lot of other processes that hopefully add to more efficiency. So, you know, we harp on about, you know, it is all about the data, and data is power. But that's what we're trying to do by get a better understanding of that. So that's one of our perspectives around how we see the future kind of changing in this domain.
Right. Well, there's, with the whole COVID situation, again, from the pharmaceutical point of view, and they've been doing this for quite a while right now, but it's only connected with clinical trials and things like that, and properties of chemical properties of molecules in general. It's we invested $1 gazillion in these drugs years ago, and we even made a penny out of them, because that's how the pharma business worked. But we might be able to piece together some evidence from this drug and this result and this clinical trial that it might really have some activity against COVID or something like that. So it is, and it seems to be working a little bit better every year. And I think this COVID thing is going to accelerate the process. There'll be more investment, and that's kind of where all information is going to be going. I think people are going to learn a lot from this experience.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct that we're learning that we were very unprepared, and we need to figure out how we can anticipate the future better. Well, with that, we're pretty close to the end of our Zoom presentation. I want to make mention that we're using one of our local chapter members' Zoom accounts, Nitza Medina-Garcia, and unfortunately, our condolences go out to her. Her father passed last week, and she's at her father's funeral as we speak, which is why she couldn't host, and why I had to step up and do the tap dance getting this thing going. And I want to thank everyone, Wasim, Steve, Andrew, and others who stepped up to help us kind of figure out how to do this. It turned out pretty well, I think. We'll be better at the next one. So with that, I want to say goodbye to all of you, and thanks for attending.